In this video, I'm going to be trimming down this piece and updating it to try and give it a more modern look. Hi, my hobby is taking discarded furniture and home goods and renewing them to give them a second life. Welcome to my channel. The first step will be to disassemble the areas that come apart easily. I'll be applying a generous coat of Citri Strip on the top and the door fronts to remove the existing finish. I then wrap it in saran wrap to prevent the stripper from drying out. After 30 minutes, I remove the plastic wrap and begin scraping off the finish with a putty knife. I then use mineral spirits and 4/0 steel wool to remove any of the residual finish and neutralize the stripper. The same process is applied to the door fronts. Now looking at this piece, because a pattern goes over the edge, I assume this to be solid, but as you'll see later, I was wrong. I begin sanding this piece with 150 grit sandpaper, followed by 180 grit sandpaper. There were a few areas on the top with minor scratches and dents, so I'm going to try and get those out by using a hot towel and an iron to raise the grain, followed by light sanding. For some of the deeper dents, I'm going to use wood filler. Okay, it's time to tackle the base. This was far too bulky and chunky looking for me, so I'm going to attempt to slim it down a bit. This was a bear to get apart as it was glued in several places. I used a rubber mallet and even a heat gun. Once the base was removed, it left the sides extra long, so I would need to trim them down. I used painter's tape on the cut line to reduce the number of splinters from the cut. I elected to use a track saw to give a nice straight line. I wanted to keep the upper part of the base because it had a nice line that conformed with the piece. However, now it just stuck out way too far and would have to be cut back to be flush with the rest of the piece. The sides would have to be trimmed off also. After the cut, I filed it down and then sanded to smooth out the edges. Now the new base sits flush with the sides. However, on the sides there's a small missing piece of veneer which I will have to repair. I'm marking the side so that I know how far to round off the edge. Now it's a good fit. Since I shortened the base to sit flush with the piece, the screw holes no longer lined up, so I need to make some modifications. I first used a larger drill to go down only about 1/4 of an inch so that I could countersink the screws. I used a center punch tool to mark the spots on the body of the piece so I knew where to drill my holes. Then the screws went in fairly easily. I've decided to use the veneer from the piece that I cut off to fill this gap. A link to the supplies and materials I'm using in this video can be found in the description section below. I'm using wood glue to attach the veneer to the base. Then taping and clamping it so that it can dry in place overnight. I'm using wood filler to fill the dents in the base as well as the gaps in the veneer that I just glued onto the body of the piece. But first, I need to sand smooth the veneer pieces that I attached to the body. After the wood filler has dried, I'm giving the entire body of the piece a scuff sand to prepare it for paint. The back of the door fronts will need to be scuff sanded to prepare for painting as well. I'm taping off the door fronts because I want to apply a clear coat, top coat, to bring out the beauty of this wood. I'm using an X-Acto knife to get a clean cut along the tape line. I'm taping off the top section as I plan on giving it a clear top coat as well. I'm first applying a coat of primer to prevent any bleed through. The primer brings out some scratches and dents that I didn't see originally, so I'm going back to fill those in and will then sand them prior to the painting. I decided to apply a second coat of primer. The paint I'm using is a black color from Valspar. This happened to be a mist tint, which I got at a great bargain. I will first filter the paint prior to applying it with the sprayer. I failed to capture the first coat of paint. Here you see me sanding the piece to remove any dust mibs in preparation for the second coat of paint. I then use a damp cloth to wipe off any dust from the sanding prior to applying the second coat. I test out my paint sprayer prior to applying the second coat of paint to ensure that I'm applying an even coat. There are several areas that I need to touch up with a paintbrush. After removing the tape, there are some areas that I need to touch up. I'm first going to use mineral spirits to try and remove the paint areas that bled through that are top of the piece. As that didn't fully remove the paint, I'm going to use sandpaper to remove the remainder of the paint. Now it's time to apply the top coat. I'm using a water-based polyurethane, and we'll end up applying a total of 3 coats the body of the piece. I love this wood grain so much and the contrast between the darker and the lighter colors that I wanted to preserve this and decided to do a top coat of clear polyurethane. I did some research, and based on the origins of this piece, which is China, the best I could surmise is that this darker wood is actually rosewood. Now, if you feel that this is different, please let me know in the comments. As I mentioned at the beginning, I thought this was one solid piece, but you can see from the burn through that this was not one solid piece. So I needed to do some touch up on those areas where I sanded through the veneer. Because of the various colors in the top of this piece, I'm going to have to apply several layers of this touch-up paint. So I'm utilizing a Stay Wet palette, which will keep my paint moist for days. If you're enjoying this video, hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more of my content, then please consider subscribing to my channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. After completing the touch-up paint, I'm going to apply the last 3 coats of polyurethane. The inside of this cabinet was actually in really good condition, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of a touch-up with Restore a Finish in mahogany applied with 4/0 steel wool. After the Restore Finish is applied, I'm going to wipe back any excess with the lint-free cloth. I'm likewise going to freshen up the inside of the drawers with Howard's Feed and Wax. I decided to add legs to the base of the cabinet to give it a more modern look. However, the legs that I ordered on Amazon did not come in the color of the base cabinet. So I'm first going to scuff sand them, apply primer, then black paint, and finally 3 coats of polyurethane to match the base of the cabinet. I first need to mark the area where I want the legs to go to ensure that I drill the hole in the appropriate spot for the base of the legs. I'm using tape to mark the depth at which I need to drill to avoid drilling through the bottom of the cabinet. Once I attach the leg base, I can then screw on the legs. Next, I need to address the hardware. I'm going to boil these in a 50-50 mixture of white vinegar and water for 30 minutes. After boiling the hardware, I'm going to scrub them with Barkeeper's Friend using 4/0 steel wool. To match the base of the cabinet, I've decided to spray paint the hardware in black. I apply a total of 2 coats. I then apply 2 coats of clear top coat to help prevent the black paint from chipping. It's then time to screw the back panel back on. And finally, the freshened up hardware is put back on the piece. I added new doorknobs, which I felt better suited the piece. Okay, let me remind you where we started. And here's the finished product. Thanks for watching.